Welcome to Liftoff. I'm Saima Siddiqui, the CEO and co-founder of Grad Greenhouse. I'm very happy to be joined today in conversation by Jonathan Kwan, Managing Director and founder of Quantum Leap Coaching. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Saima.
So, John, I would love to start off today by hearing about how you got here. If somebody has studied in Singapore in the past decade, they've probably been lucky enough to be coached by you. You're somebody who inspires the next generation as they plan for their career launch. But I'd love to hear, how did you get here? If you could tell us a bit about your journey and the work that you do today.
Thanks for all those great, kind words. I'm originally from Canada, born and raised, and although today I'm a coach, most people find it pretty surprising to know that I studied computer science and mathematics as my major in undergrad, which is pretty different. I went to a university that had a pretty robust internship program, a cooperative education is what we call it, where I had a chance to try a lot of different things before I graduated. And along the way, I learned about this profession called consulting that I'd never heard about before. And that really caught my eye, really because of the travel. I found out that there was a job that someone would pay you to go see the world. I was like, hey, I'm interested in this job. And so, the goal during undergrad was to try to get an internship and try this out. And I was fortunate enough to do that along the way. And then I guess as like every intern, your number one goal is to ensure that you can at least get invited back later. And they somehow, I did enough to get invited back. They said, hey, when you graduate, if you want to come back, we'd love to have you. And I said, yes, I will come back. And that's what started me off in this world of management consulting. And I spent about 7, now total 8 years in that industry, which I tell people is like three lifetimes, since usually only people spend a couple of years. And I had a chance to do a little bit of everything and travel the world as well. So Singapore, where I'm based in now, I had actually come through Singapore a few times before that for work with some projects. And I never thought I would necessarily come and live here full time. But like many consultants on the way, I thought about potentially going back to school, getting a master's degree. And when I surveyed all the different ones, there was this school that had a campus here in Singapore called INSEAD. France was their main campus, but they had opened up one in Singapore. Now it had been 10 years, I think, at the time when I joined. And I was like, oh, okay, that can kind of maybe be a nice little quasi, a little bit of the Western style with a little bit of the Eastern style. And I had some friends who I'd worked with before who were out here already studying there. So I came out on a backpacking trip at that time and visited them. And I was like, hey, this be kind of cool. So that's what got me here literally 15 years ago to literally this month. I came January 2008 to study. And then after that, I was like, okay, what the hell do I want to do? Right? And the only thing I knew I didn't want to do was do what I used to do, which was management consulting beforehand. And on the way, I was going through the exploration phase, and 2008 wasn't exactly the prime time to be trying out a lot of different things, if you remember those times. But this profession of coaching, sitting down with others and helping them with their career and figuring out how to help them go quicker, higher, faster, or go from here to there was really appealing to me. And so, like every entrepreneur, I was speaking to a few people and someone gave me my very first break. They introduced me to my very first client, which happened to be a university here in Singapore that was relatively new at the time. And they took a chance on me, and here we are 15 years later. But when people ask me, how'd you go from consulting into coaching? I think the real part of the story that I don't always get to share is actually, it wasn't that much of a jump, because in my undergrad days as a student, I volunteered in the Career Center on campus. I was one of those rare, super curious people that read all the notice boards around campus. Anytime I walked around, I would look at flyers and stuff, and there's like 100 flyers on these boards. I would go around and scour them. And there was this one time I saw that said, hey, if you volunteer to be a student career advisor 3 hours a week for a semester, we'll train you up on what it takes to, write a good resume and interview skills and all this. And at the time I was only year 2. I was like, well, I don't know anything. I'd never worked a day in my life. Right? Never had any part-time jobs except for my local tennis court. being like the clubhouse manager. That was my only line on my resume. So I was like, look, if I want to compete, I should probably go to the guys that know. So I ended up doing that, thinking it was just going to be a trade for one semester. I'll go in there, volunteer for one semester, learn the skills, and then I'll do something else. But I really enjoyed that whole process of sitting down with peers at the time, even senior students, to help them, starting with a resume review and then helping them with, resources in the center that they could go and read up about where they may want to go. And I always tell people my most favorite client was a student. It was a fourth year arts major who was like, I don't know what I want to do. It was pretty classic. I said, okay, well, let's dream big. What's your dream job so I can help you with your resume? She says, you know what? I would love to work on a Disney cruise ship. I said, that's great. Well, let's sit down. What does it take? What are the kind of skills, transferable skills? And that just got me hooked there. So I ended up spending, like 4 years of my undergrad in the Career Center as a volunteer. Then when I went into consulting, I ended up helping with the recruiting part, mainly because I wanted to have some say on what kind of people I'd get to work with, and I thought that was my way to influence. So all that kind of led up to me eventually becoming a coach. So although initially it looks like, hey, consultant to just entrepreneur and then a coach, that's so weird. Actually, it always kind of been there in the background. Parts here. When you look at it now, looking backwards, it's easy to kind of connect those dots.
It's interesting though. You mentioned, walking around campus, reading all the billboards, knowing that you wanted to, when you were in consulting originally, wanting to get a full-time offer. I mean, that there was an inherent motivation there that, as somebody who works with students, sometimes you have to light that fire. What do you think? Why do you think you naturally had it, or what made you sort of driven to already know that you needed those things?
Today, I'd like to think is just in my DNA, this innate curiosity, and that's what makes me good at my job. But I mean, to be honest, we didn't have this term back then, but maybe it was a little bit of the FOMO. Right? Going around. And I was just thought, I really believed that like knowledge was power, information was power. So the more I read up, it could be useful. I wasn't necessarily the most smartest guy that come up with crystal ball strategic thinking. So at least if I could be someone that at least read a bunch of stuff to be like, oh yeah, I read about this. Hey, did you know about this organization or that student group? I thought that could be a way to kind of gain some sort of advantage, considering I was, again, I was not really good at computer science. I mean, I was not one of those kind of guys. I did okay, right? So I thought this was my differentiating factor per se. And I think that continues to be true today. I mean, if anything, it's more true today than before because there's way more information. I mean, I'm a little older, but we did have the internet back then. So, and now that everything's so instant and so much more information, how do you even discern between that? How do you know? And I think when, especially fresh grads, when they're thinking, okay, how am I going to stand out? Right? I would say just being connected and being resourceful can be huge, right? Right? The other skills about how to actually solve some of these complex problems that you're working on, no one's going to expect you to bring those goods on day one, right? But at least being able to have some friends to ask,
and knowing
here
ask.
and there.
It's interesting, the example that you just gave about the Disney cruise ship. I don't know if you read Adam Grant. He was speaking about weak links in a class, and and about asking somebody who wanted to work at maybe a Disney theme park or something in their class, and said, they put out that ask to these weak links in the class, and then somebody in the class was able to put them in touch with the head of a park. And so the role of weak connections and just articulating your dream and getting it out there.
The world is more connected than ever before. So when people say how, I don't know anybody that could get me there, actually just a couple of words. And I like some of the stuff he's been talking about and others about the weak links. Because I've been personally more about it's about deep links. And here in Asia, we have this term guanxi. It's about, how the relationships and relationships take time. Trust takes time to build. But at the same time, sometimes just putting it out there. And that's where I think Adam Grant and others have been popularizing the whole thing. Hey, yes, it's good to have BFFs and people that, you really trust, but sometimes you never know by just, taking that first step by voicing it out there. And I think that's a great example.
So can you tell us a little bit about the work you do with universities, with individuals?
I kind of say I work with the under 40 crowd is my specialty. And so I work a lot with, usually starting at the university level, undergraduates, masters, PhDs, and, alumni now who've been out of school maybe like 0 to 10 years and, help them figure out what they want to do. So at the younger ages, what exactly I may want to do. And maybe at the older ages, I'm already doing this, but I'd love to try something else, or I want to go here. And in a few rare occasions, actually, I love what I do, but I'd love to go quicker, higher, and faster. These are the kind of general problems I solve. And so it's a mix of working with people one-on-one and other times in groups. And I even, teach some classes at some of the universities, with some of the career fundamentals and some new things like, design thinking. It's not that new, but it's a relatively new thing in the career vocabulary. How do we apply this, problem solving process to ourselves? And the guys at Stanford, have really popularized that, especially with their book Designing Your Life. And I've been a huge fan of that movement over the years.
Interesting. So you've worked with universities. You mentioned you work a lot with undergrads. I know personally that you work with MBAs. Tell us some of the biggest areas of need that you've seen with fresh grads in terms of upskilling or really just being aware of how to position themselves for careers. And what skills do you think are critical for career launchers?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk these days about skills, moving away from experiences per se or previous experience to skills. But I have a slightly different take on that, because I think once we start getting to skills, there's just a over-reliance on technical hard skills, right? And I would say, I think we need to realize that skills, there's a whole wide gamut. And the ones that I think are lacking the most are, labeled, unfortunately, the soft skills, but I would say the people-related skills, the skills that you need to work with others. And I don't know many professions and roles today where you can just sit in a room and work by yourself. Right? I mean, even traditional roles like academics who do research and generally do a lot by themselves, a lot of the research today that are groundbreaking requires you to collaborate with other researchers doing similar things versus you trying to, make that big break on your own. So I think the skills for younger people, especially, since you won't have the depth of hard skills yet, and that takes time to be doing it in the environment, right? As you go, the focus on the people part is partly, I think, the one that's going to differentiate you early on, right? I mean, you've been working with people since young. If anything, in your 4 years of undergrad, working with your peers, right? And you'll be working with peers and older people along the way. So if you can show some differentiation, appreciation for what that really means, how humans work, if I were just to boil it down to the purists, I think that's going to really resonate with a lot of people. Because again, if you focus on, your analytical skills, or even if you're into the sexy STEM stuff with your coding, I mean, how much better can you be against some of these veterans that have been in there? That'll be really difficult, and you won't have that much work experience, right? So I think that, over relying on the hard, tangible ones, which I get because you can measure them and people can test you with a challenge, right? Whether it's a coding challenge or a case challenge. But I think, even in these assessment centers, which is one of these challenges where you put multiple people together, you can have the greatest idea, but if you can't work with your group of 5 or 6 and work collaboratively, you're not going to make it.
So how do you build that muscle? If you're a third year, fourth year student, how do you showcase that?
I think you're already doing it, but you don't realize it, right? Because most universities around the world have some component of group work now. I mean, the days of you just going through your university degree and sitting by yourself in a room studying and then spitting out, multiple choice, exam answers to get the piece of paper, those days are gone. Every school now has some sort of element where you've got to work with others. So I know it's not always the easiest thing to do. And I remember going, man, what a pain in the ass. And what if I have to, I have to do all the work because there's some slacker that I've got to carry and these, I get
very
that. And I
like
was on both sides. Yeah, very much like that. Right. So, but if you embrace some of that and you're able to make an impact there, well, here, I want to try to do something a little different. I mean, I think the thing that, people are too focused on, yes, we need to have some results. It's great to show that you got A triple plus, or you got 100%, or you were your dean's list type of stuff. But actually, I think it's the stories that are the showcasing piece. When you sit in front of the employer and says, okay, so, teamwork. Tell us a little bit about your experiences with teamwork, because we work a lot in teams. Tell me a time you worked in a team. What employers don't want to hear is like, oh yeah, there's this, one time working this great group. I was the lead and there are a few people, maybe not as motivated as me, but I was able to get them inspired and I did, double the work, pulled a couple all-nighters at the end. Yeah, A triple plus. I kicked some butt, right? Yeah, I mean, that story's boring and it's a bit fake, right? And actually it doesn't really say that much about you. It sounds like when going gets tough, you'll just suck it up and do everybody's work, which initially might sound interesting, but to a veteran, that sounds unsustainable, absolutely. Right? I mean, that doesn't really give me a lot of warm fuzzies like, oh, you're really good. But if you've got a great story where there's some drama and you tried to fix it, maybe you weren't able to get everybody on there, but you tried this, and you realize, okay, you know what? I should have done that earlier. Instead of waiting till like the week before, which is usually when the drama happens, if I had just sat down maybe that first time, first meeting and second meeting and set our expectations, I think I could have avoided some of that drama. I mean, that's the light bulb and experience from go, yeah, that's pretty smart of you to realize that now. Yeah, let's not wait till the end. So I actually think a lot of the time many have the opportunities, but they don't realize it. And no one's really told them that that's probably more interesting of a story versus, all your, great certificates and trophies and hard skill type of stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, when you described it, I thought of some nuggets that I will share with my son as he's interviewing for summer internships, because you're so right. Really sharing the story and the experience and demonstrating that you have the ability to see these things and to manage them is invaluable. I mean, that's what you're looking for as an employer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, results are nice, right? But I would rather take an interesting story that's realistic, that has some drama because it was tricky for you and trying to work your way out of it, versus one that goes smooth, right? Nobody likes a smooth story. Nobody likes to go to the movies to watch something where you can predict every single, step of the plot, right? It's boring.
So I wanted to talk to you about the Great Resignation, as they're calling it, which I think is, incredible branding. Whoever put that together, fantastic.
I'm not sure. I read it first from Korn Ferry, so I've been giving them the credit, but I don't know who's the actual one.
It's so apocalyptic sounding, and it just really frames it in an interesting way. But, there was a recent headline in the Straits Times that 25% of Singapore workers are planning to resign from their jobs in the next 6 months, which is, I assume it's unprecedented. That seems enormous to me. What is happening? I mean, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening, and, what are the best employers doing to stem this tide and to engage and retain talent?
Yeah. Okay. So let's take the first part here. What's going on? I mean, some of those numbers, if you dig a little bit deeper, are actually not super surprising, because every year there's relatively, a decent amount of turnover. And in Singapore, a place that's humming and going really quickly and growing with lots of new opportunities, there's a decent churn rate, right? So I think the number 25 within 6 months might have grabbed people's attention. But actually in these next 6 months, this is a period where generally there's a lot of churn, because bonus season usually happens around, February, March. So I used to tell people musical chairs is April. If you want a new job, you need to be ready for April, because people kind of get their bonus and they're thinking, oh, maybe I try something else now. You want to be ready for musical chairs season. But I mean, I would say 25% is probably even underreported. My feeling it's a lot higher, right? I mean, I'm looking at my LinkedIn feed every day and seeing the number of messages of people saying this is my last day. It's just, it's incredible. I've been tracking this for over a year. It started with 1 out of 5 messages. And it ended up December 31st, like 8 out of 10 messages were like, it's my last day. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's pretty high. But I mean, the easy answer is that people have had time to start thinking about it more. I think that's really step number 1, right? In maybe previous years where we weren't under so much stress, it was business as usual, things were going. And when things are going, you don't necessarily think about it. You just keep going. But when all of a sudden there's this, new stress and new change, and you really have had the time because you've been isolated, literally, and physically isolated, and you've been wondering, okay, so what does this really mean, right? And knowing that this wasn't a short blip of 3 to 4 months, right? 3 to 4 months has turned into 2 years and ongoing. I think people have started to question, okay, you know what? Maybe I don't really like this. And then all it takes is a few role models that you see. They're going to say, okay, well, if that guy can do it, I mean, why can't I do it? And now that there's a bit of a momentum, I feel like people are just like, yeah, okay, why not? It's kind of in fashion almost a little bit to do this, right? So as a coach, I mean, part of it is exciting, right? It's great to have people empowered and feel like, they're not trapped, because that might have been the, opposite years ago, where you're like, well, I would love to do something, but I'm trapped, right? I mean, things are going okay, and I need the money and all this kind of stuff. So let's not rock the boat. It's bad, but it's not that bad, right? But now that people are empowered to go, well, I don't need to take that. Why should I have to? You know what? There could be better things. Let's go looking for that. I like that. But what I'm a little nervous about is that I did a recent poll on my LinkedIn, just a casual one for a week at the beginning of this year. And I asked people basically, look, if you've switched jobs in the last year, are you planning to? Why are you doing it? For what types of reasons? And I labeled the reasons in 2 categories: push factors versus pull factors. Those are the general 2. Push factors are basically things about your current job that are pushing you out, saying, hey, I can't do it anymore. I can't stand the boss or my coworkers or the pay or the environment. It's just too stressful. I want out. You're getting pushed out. Versus pull factors, where you see something else out there that's attracting you. You can say, wow, that looks exciting. I'm really excited about this, journey, or that person or this part of the world attracting you over there. Now, again, reality is it's always a mix of push versus pull factors, but there's usually, when you sit down with people, 1 or 2 dominant ones, the ones that are the big reason, right? Yes, a mix, but there's usually 1 or 2. So I ask people, so which one is it? Is it a push or is it a pull? And unfortunately, and maybe not too surprisingly to me, but unfortunately, 80% of the people who responded said it was push factors that made the move.
Wow.
Right? Versus pull factors. So why am I nervous about that? Because it's great that you want to make a move, but if making a move is just because you're trying to get out of your current situation, are you just kicking the can down the road? Is it going to be like, oh, grass is always green over here, then you go there, and now we're just going to have this, well, it's not much better here, right? So yes, great that you want to make a move, but I don't like the fact that no one's really looking at where they're going. They just want to make a move for that sake. And that makes me really nervous. To me, that's just a sign that we're going to just have, a real big churn factor for the next year and a half, where people go and then they go give it a couple months. And depending how old you are, the older you might give more time. The younger you might be like, oh, hell no, YOLO. So I'm not going to go suck it up for a year and a half. I'm out now. Right. And I think we're in for some choppy waters. That's my thought right now. So it's not just great resignation. I think it's, I don't know, great instability, man. We're on like a little teetering boat. Everybody's trying to figure out what that means, both on the employer side and the employee side, right? But changing employers is difficult. Changing you is something that, I think we can have some hope in doing.
My concern also about people moving from this push factor, this dissatisfaction, this feeling of being disconnected or not valued or not tied into a greater mission, or overworked or underappreciated, whatever it is, a myriad of things that's pushing them to take a new role. And then in this remote environment, how can they build the connections they need? Because I'm worried that those connections are going to be so weak in the new role, because you've never met the people in person, and you're working on this thing. You may be sort of tangential to the central mission of the work. Like, I agree with you that instability is what I see ahead as well. But how have you seen, employers create those bonds with incoming new employees or retain them? And how have you seen new employees stand out and sort of make their mark? Or what recommendations would you have for folks going into a fully remote first job or new job?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of employers are trying different things, especially with the younger guys, right? Depending on where you are in the world, here in Asia, and especially in Singapore, we have had the ability to meet in small groups in the office, right? So I think they've been taking advantage of that to do some sort of physical onboarding there, maybe not in the greater cohort, but at least in smaller types of things. And I think that helps a little bit at the beginning too. I think some of the smarter employers are experimenting. I haven't heard anything really great yet that's definitely worked, but I know some of the smarter ones realize this and are just trying different things, right? So that is, again, another good sign of, not just relying on what's past or, the initial thing was what we call the lift and shift approach. Just take what we were doing in person and just throw it online and start with that. And I'm like, okay, well, we realize that's not working. So we got to, experiment with that. But, from the candidate's perspective, not easy to do, but my advice is, do more homework about the companies that you want to join, and not just the companies themselves, but specifically the people that you're going to be working with. Right? I mean, along the way, you'll have met at least one or two people you'll work with, aka the boss. I mean, the hiring manager, the one that you're being reported to, you will have met them. I mean, if you haven't met them before you join, I mean, that's probably a sign you shouldn't join them, right? I mean, that makes me really nervous. You don't know who's going to be dictating your daily, success, happiness, or unhappiness, right? I mean, that's a red flag. But beyond that, like, have you gotten a chance to meet some of your colleagues and coworkers, right? And I would say, depending on how big the team is, of all age ranges, right? Some of the, maybe the lieutenant right-hand go-to person of the boss would be a nice person to meet, to see how you bond with, and peer level people, maybe the fresh grads that are just a little bit ahead of you, because you're probably going to be in the trenches with them more so than sometimes your direct bosses and the senior people, right? So have you had a chance to sit with them? And I think if you can take that time, and it's not that much more time, to be honest, right? But if you can take that will help you feel more confident in that transition and get you probably, maybe one step further ahead as you integrate in there.
So how do you ask, as a candidate, how do you ask for that? Is it pretty standard?
Yeah, that's a great question. Near the end. Right? I think as you get closer to the end and you realize there's a good fit and you feel like there's a chance that they're going to give you an offer, or you wait for when the offer is before just accepting it, that's probably the time where you want to say, hey, thank you so much. This is really exciting. I really appreciate the confidence. There's a couple of things I haven't had a chance. I'd love to meet more people. Would it be possible to arrange some chit chats? I'd love to meet more people in the team just to kind of connect with them, because I know it's going to be important for you and for me, right? And that's probably the time, because once there's an offer, that's me saying I want you, right? And FYI, no employer wants to be turned down. Nobody likes rejection, both professionally and personally, right? So if I'm really saying I want you, and you're starting to make fairly reasonable demands, right? I mean, we're not talking about, you're going to meet 100 people. I want to meet the CEO. Otherwise, I'm not going to join you guys. I'm just talking about people, that you would work with, but are very reasonable. I think it's an easy no-brainer, right? And today, you might not come into the office, but we can click a button, and even a half an hour Zoom chat, right, with 3 or 4 others could already tip the scales.
That's great.
And I realized this when I was young, and I was very fortunate, because when I was graduating undergrad and starting my first job, I knew consulting was what I really wanted to do. I'd done my internships there, and I had my offer from my old firm, but I interviewed with, all the competition as well, right? And I was fortunate to get a few different offers with some of the other competitors, ones that even paid way more than the offer that my firm was giving me, right? And, some of the people that I met, especially the bosses, were all really nice, right? But I realized that just being treated nice by the boss wasn't going to be enough, because especially in consulting, where we're very collaborative, right? And you've got to work long hours with the people around you. I knew the people in my age range was going to be the key. So I asked a lot of them and said, hey, could I come into the office and maybe have lunch with some of your younger guys just to kind of chit chat? I'd love to ask them some informal questions. Would that be okay? And not a single person turned me down. They said, yeah, no problem. We can arrange the lunch, right? And when I then came in for lunch, I saw things in a slightly different light, let's just say, right? Again, the guys at the top are saying the right things. We want you, John. You're great. You're going to be great here. We see so much potential in you. You're feeling the love, as you should. But then I realized, well, that's part of their job, right? So let me just see what's going to happen at the working level. And then I started to be like, okay, I don't know, this guy, and not the same. And again, it was difficult, because I already had an offer from a place that I'd worked at for 8 months. So, that was a huge jump there, right? So for me, that was kind of an easy choice to go back. But if I had it all neutral, again, I would say that's a couple of other data points there that really could tip the scales. And I did that at B school as well. So it wasn't just for jobs. When I was thinking about going back to business school, I had the fortune to sit in some of the classes physically at some of the schools I was very keen on, to really compare They all look good on the
Yeah.
rankings. They all look good on paper, and they all say the right things. But once I sat in the rooms, the atmosphere, the types of students, and when I try to map it onto my personality, I was like, I don't know about this one, right? This is, wow, okay, yeah, you know what? Yeah, if I had the choice, probably not
Yeah.
this one. And that, I think that would be already a huge changer right there. I think.
There's a lot going on in the US around micro internships. The idea that you would do a small project based or project, a paid project for a company to get to know them and to get your work and your profile in front of them as well. And I know, can you talk a little bit about that as a way that smart employers are understanding the students before they enter, and that students are positioning themselves and doing a little bit of what you just described, maybe not a full internship, but getting to know the culture and the work.
Yeah. I mean, the real smart employers that really value young people have been doing that for many years, getting embedded inside the university at whatever level they can. The ideal is the classroom, but, obviously, there's always this divide between purity of what we teach and the influence from corporations. But again, universities are evolving in terms of giving a space to do some of this experiential learning and doing collaborations, whether these micro internships or case competitions or these short little projects here. I think it's great for both parties, right? Great for the universities to see what it's really like at some of the schools and get a initial scouting, if you will, right? And for the students to get a little feel of that as well, right? But I think the key to these is there's got to be enough interaction. There are some schools now that are just like to say that I have, all these projects with all these corporations and flash the logo. But when you hear about the mechanism, it's basically, yeah, I met you on day one. I gave you a mission brief, and then you've got 2 months, and then later you come back and you present, and then that's it. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's not too useful, right? I mean, that's just you milking brains and getting some free work, right? You're not really getting to know these guys and not really getting to know you. So I think if you're trying to evaluate where to spend your precious time, right, especially as a student, you've got to make sure there's ideally more touch points than just that.
One question about early talent recruiting. Have you seen anything creative or interesting, different in the early talent space that you think is noteworthy and that employers can learn from? Because employers, that aren't the big brand name employers are struggling to differentiate themselves in this virtual world. So I'd love to hear any thoughts or things that you've seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything too crazy on this side of the world yet. We're usually a little bit more conventional and a little bit, a bit of a laggard when it comes to trying new and sexy things, right? I mean, right now, the industries that are hot that have to try new things to attract is the technology industries, right? But tech uses cheap tricks like more money, right? Because they can, to lure people initially. And again, yes, you can put some challenges out there because tech requires more hard skills that are, quantifiable and tangible so that we can get a better idea of your skills. But again, I still think that's a bit of a mistake. There are a lot of guys that can just do the job. And even at that level, how much better is each one going to be? Maybe plus or minus, and they're going to be a couple all-stars. But you still need to people to communicate with you. And that's usually the biggest part of the problem. They can all build stuff, but we might have misinterpreted a little bit. And by the time it comes out, we got to go and redo and fix the bugs and that whole churn. It would have been better if we were on the same page from the beginning. And I think, unfortunately, for the tech firms that are really growing, the pace is so rapid that they don't think about that. They're just like, I need a bum in this seat, so let's just get this guy and pay him a little bit more. And we've seen this in history. Many industries have had this thing. So I wish I had more good stuff here. I think, though, what's going to be really interesting right now with this great resignation is that if you're a company that's having a hard time keeping people, right, and you can't fill those voids in a fast enough manner, I think that means that if you're interested in joining some of these firms and you might not have had the traditional profile, the one that's basically, I've done it before, been there, done that, I think this is opportunity here because I think employers will now have to. I mean, I wish they've been doing it all along, but now for sure they have to be more open-minded especially if speed is important to them. If you can hold out and wait for that, been there, done that person to realize that, their current place isn't great and they're going to come over, great. But the chance of that happening is going to be slim. And again, a lot of these people now that are resigning, they're not actually wanting to just do the same thing. They want to do more or different. And if you're not open-minded to that, then you're going to be in some trouble. So either you take younger guys, right? Which is positive for fresh grad. Okay, I would have loved the 5-year veteran, but you know what? I'm open to even a fresh grad to do this, right? Or you're open to someone that has maybe a broader portfolio, done a little bit of it plus other things, right? Yeah. And to me, that sounds like a stronger foundation, right? So once we get past this uncertainty, choppy waters, if you can build that diverse team, you've got a couple of hardcores that have been really focused on doing this. Plus you bring some people with this part and that part, but passion for this. I mean, that's why they're here, right? They quit their old thing and they're joining you.
I don't have the profile for this technical role, but I love it. I know everything about this company. I follow them on every social media. How do I as a candidate make that case?
I mean, the answer is easy. Doing it is not so easy. It's just, you got to get in front of someone so you can talk to them and share that to them, right? I mean, if you're really a social media guru, you can create the viral TikToks and hope that it gets in front and at whoever you need to and hope that it gets there. Or again, through the example we were talking about with the weak links, just saying, look, I'm really passionate about joining company X. Do you happen to know anybody right there? We'd love to just chat with them, just to find out more what's going on. And through that, once you're able to get in front of them, you can show them, hey, by the way, I've been following this. I know this. What are you guys here? It's very easy, especially at the young levels. When you meet someone and they say they really want to work for you, whether you're, that person's a pretender or they're legit, right? It only takes 5-6 minutes, a couple of questions, realize, okay, you really serious about this, right? And that is the starting point. I mean, that's not going to get you hired, but that's going to get you the foot in the door and to kind of say, okay, what are we going to do about this? So we've got to do more than just clicking online, right? And follow and like. That's not enough, right? You've got to be more active. And I would think old school, like face-to-face human interaction versus sending emails and just crossing your fingers, right? I mean, everybody can do that. That's so easy.
Right. And I think the value of face-to-face and really wanting to engage is even greater, I would say, based on, after the past 2 years. I think that it just makes such a difference. And so I think that's super valuable. Thank you. That's a great. And I just wanted to close with, you've given lots of great advice for somebody launching their career. We work with universities that are positioning students for careers. So I would love one gold and platinum piece of advice for a career launcher.
Learn about this thing called the coffee chat. I think coffee chats are my secret weapon. They've been around for a long time. In the career vocabulary, we call them informational interviews. So if you don't know what we're talking about and you're listening to this and you're a young person, go to your career center and say, hey, I heard about this thing called informational interviews. What is it about? This thing called the coffee chat, right? But I think the key to the coffee chat is realizing why it's there and the purity of it. Coffee chats are a great opportunity for you to talk to someone who's doing something you're potentially interested in and find out what it's really like. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Coffee chats are not an opportunity to go find that person and kiss their butt and beg for a job. Because if that's how you're doing it, which is what most people are doing it, that's never going to work. But if you go in there just curious and pure, and you've done some homework already, right? You can't be like, hey, I'm really curious, but I don't know anything. Please tell me what you do. What's a day in the life? I mean, that's not going to work. But if you say, I'm really curious, I know this already, but I would love to learn more. Can I sit down and buy you a coffee or even a 15-minute Zoom chat? I think that's going to be the secret weapon. And start with just people that are close to you. It'd be great to do that with the hiring manager, but that might not be so easy. So what about a peer? What about a former intern, right? Yep. They know people too. So work your way up slowly, right? Friends of friends, weak ties, strong ties, family friends, cousins, your auntie, people that you wouldn't necessarily consider. The world's much smaller than you think. So if you're like, I don't know anybody that knows this, I would beg to differ. With a couple of, putting it out there ways, you'll realize, oh, there's someone I know who knows this. And you start from there. Yeah, that's my goal.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. Thank you for joining us today. I love talking to you always. And thank you all very much for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.